Hello and welcome to Baseball Barbacast, the only baseball podcast in the world more despised than the Houston Astros. I'm Jake Mintz. That's Jordan Shusterman. And you know you're shining when you have haters, Jordan.
Oh, that's true. That's true. That's a good way to start. I was so sure you were going to make an Ohtani wife, offensive rebounding joke. But instead, we are here to talk about the American League West, which, by the way, Shohei Ohtani doesn't play in anymore. So you're going to have to wait for our review of his beautiful wife's highlights from her time as a professional basketball player for another podcast, because on this episode, this Friday edition, we'll be previewing the division in which Ohtani no longer plays in. The American League West has 5 baseball teams. One of them happens to be my favorite baseball team, but there are 4 others that are very important to our sport as well. But before we get to the AL West, Jake, first of all, happy Friday.
1 second about the AL West.
Yeah.
It has 5 teams. It didn't always. And I think an underrated bananas thing about our sport is that there used to be 4 teams in the AL West and 6 in the NL Central. And that was chill. It was so much harder.
Not long ago. This isn't even something that I don't remember,
Right.
It is so goofy, and it really messes with it. Whenever I go back, I'm just like, I can't take any of this seriously, because why was there a different team? This makes no sense.
The Reds silly. Finished 6th? What?
Finishing 6th. Think about how much it sucks to finish 5th right now, right?
Finishing 6th in the NL Central is like being drafted in the 53rd round or something. It's
right, because it doesn't exist anymore. You cannot sink to those depths. But before we get to the AL West, we did want to at least acknowledge the latest news regarding Mr. Gerrit Cole of the New York Yankees. As far as I'm concerned, this is not really, I guess, that much of an update. This is basically exactly what I expected was going to happen. The latest news is that Gerrit Cole will not get Tommy John imminently. Dr. Neil Elatrosh has decided, you know what? You don't have a tear. As far as we know, this is at least some sort of difference from some of the other cases in the past where it's like, I think with Andrew Painter last year, this really feels like deja vu with that. It was like partial tear. Give it a rest. We'll see what happens. As far as we know, he does not have a tear, but this is still going to be at least a few months before he's throwing a baseball again.
Yeah. Let me roll up my sleeves here, Jordan, and show off my own Tommy John scar and speak from a place.
I like how you rolled up both sleeves. That was funny, as if you got it on both
I don't want to be imbalanced. That's how you re-tear the ligament. Okay. Where to begin? I think this is very funny and silly, and we just usually in these situations, what ends up happening is the person gets Tommy John surgery, right? The track record of players with elbow injuries who rest and do PRP injections and rehab them, never going under the knife, that's a small group of players. It is. Yeah. I don't have data in front of me, but I feel pretty confident anecdotally that that's the case.
Seen this enough times.
Seen this enough times. Now, is there a chance Gerrit Cole is fine and doesn't need TJ? Sure. Absolutely. Definitely a possibility. But I remain skeptical. It's almost like if I said, I'm not going to clean the kitchen right now. Maybe later. Maybe I'll do it later. But not right now.
Are you saying that because you are going to have to clean the kitchen at some point?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, my only
Jordan, right here. You're coming to crash at my apartment next week, and at some point, I will make this bed that you're going to sleep in, but not right now.
Not right now. My only 2 thoughts on this. One, which is, I agree with what you said. That's generally where I fall on this. It's just if he doesn't have a tear, I guess you can't just tell him to get the surgery, but it still is hard to feel great about this. And by the way, the most important thing is that the New York Yankees are not going to have Gerrit Cole for a couple months. So that's a fact. That is a thing that is undeniable at this point, and that is a big deal in and of itself, regardless of what happens after. But the other interesting element to this is that as we started when we first got this news, is that Gerrit Cole has been so healthy. Gerrit Cole has been so durable. And I think that the fact that he kind of flagged this and said, I'm not bouncing back, even if he doesn't have a tear, shows me that he was hypersensitive to this, and that's understandable. Because if Gerrit Cole knows he's not right, even if it's not, oh, my elbow has totally gone, that is, I like trust him in that sense, even if it is something less than the full tear. So maybe that's maybe the positive spin, that he did just feel like something's a little bit off and this is what he needs. But we've just seen this so many times that it's hard to feel like that this isn't going to end up with something more serious. But either way, for now, it is a massive deal for the New York Yankees. And it'll obviously, he will not be starting on opening day. And again, we need to get to the AL West, but who's starting on opening day for the Yankees is now suddenly a very bizarre storyline that seems to be more complicated than necessary.
And how should the Yankees respond to this? My mind is you have two options. Okay. Either trust your pitching development and the young starters that you have in your system. Give Will Warren, Chase Hampton, Clayton Beeter, Luis Hill, give those guys a shot through April. Use them as one of them as the 5-starter, cycle through them as the 5-starter. The rest of your rotation, if it stays healthy, is still pretty good. Like if everyone pitches up to their capabilities, Rodon, Clark, Schmidt, Nestor Cortez, and Marcus Stroman, like that's a good rotation. That's a rotation that can make the playoffs, right? Or sign Blake Snell or Jordan Montgomery, or overpay for Jesus Luzardo or Shane Bieber. Like, pick a lane. Either go all in, and this is a gotta go for it year, or it's not.
I mean,
right?
It is. To me, it's still that in some ways, considering what happened last year. Like, there's not really turning back once you traded for 1 year of Juan Soto, and I think that's where Yankees fans are sitting.
Well, I'm fine with them rolling with the young guys to start the year. And if like Cole is out for longer or someone else gets hurt or is bad, then you can make a deal at that point. That's what like trades are for. But I don't see value in like signing Michael Lorenzen, I guess is my point. No half measures, Walter White. Let's transition from the American League East to the American League West. Like we said, 5 teams, no longer 4. And the order here is interesting, and obviously we will begin.
Well, let me just say, it's okay. It used to only be 4 teams, and the team that wasn't there was the team that has won this division for however many years in a row now, and that is, of course, the Houston Astros. We just had the first ever all AL West ALCS. Okay, so we are coming off a season in which this division is ever relevant. But we are going to begin from worst to first. We are going to go in order from the project. Now, this is one where the over-unders and the projections do not necessarily jive in terms of the order of the teams. But we are going to stick with the over-unders. And, of course, no matter how you slice it, we are going to be starting with the A's of Oakland.
The Astros have won this division 6 out of the 11 years that they've been in the division. So they have won the division more often than they haven't since joining it.
Yeah. So, and of course, they joined it right as they were coming out, I guess. Well, whatever. Anyway, okay, we'll get to the Astros later. Okay, let's talk about the A's. What happened to the A's in 2023? Oh, boy. Well, it wasn't great. They lost the most games of any baseball team. And in addition to that, they had just all kinds of embarrassing and heartbreaking things happening to them off the field involving their team being taken away from them in terms of the city of Oakland.
From a win-loss perspective, it was the worst season in Oakland franchise history.
Yes.
Right.
The A's have a history of epic losing, but
correct.
Oakland,
the 1916
it was the
Philadelphia A's, as we all remember, went 36 and 117 and won. Mm-hmm. But last year was the worst season in Oakland history.
Yeah. And it felt that way. It was a team that was essentially designed to lose. But I will say, and I wrote this in the AOS preview that came up, or that's going up at Yahoo today. I am way more excited to watch this team this year than last year, because last year it was truly built to fail. Whereas this year we have enough young players coming up where it's like, I will tune into the A's, and there are players that I am intrigued to see how they are doing. I know we had some, minor breakouts last year, but anyway, let's get to who's on this baseball team, Jake. Who is on?
Just to say, what did they do over the winter besides making a sham and a shanda of their move to Las Vegas and embarrassing themselves at every turn.
I mean, they gave us those
very
renderings,
little.
so I'm appreciative of that.
They got Alex Wood and Ross Stripling.
Yep,
I guess
Alex Wood, Ross Stripling. They I guess they traded for Abraham Toro, Miguel Andujar, who is absolutely torching spring training. So we'll see how much playing time he gets. But as we expected, not a lot of big acquisitions this winter.
Behind the dish is Shea Langoliers. He may split time back there a little bit with Tyler Soderstrom. Soderstrom, I think, will get most of his time at first base or DH, where he'll kind of rotate around with Ryan Noda. Brent Rooker is going to see, obviously, the All-Star last year, a lot of time at DH, maybe a little bit of time for him in the outfield as well. Second base looks like Zach Geloff, which is interesting. He played third base coming up the chain in college, I believe, but he is one of the more exciting hitters on the squad. Third base is a bit of a question mark. Abraham Toro does seem to have the inside track on that right now. Nick Allen at short. The outfield of Esteury Ruiz, Lawrence Butler, JJ Bleday, Seth Brown will be involved there. It's not exactly the most scintillating group, but there are players to watch in that batch, which I can't really say for the pitching as much. Rotation, JP Sears, Paul Blackburn, Alex Wood, Ross Stripling, and Joe Boyle. Joe Boyle is very fun. We'll get to him in a second. In the bullpen, they're going to throw Mason Miller in there, right? He's going to start the year out of the bullpen.
He'll probably be closing.
And Trevor Gott. I mean, the one big question for this team really has very little to do with what's going on the field. Because what's so bizarre, right, is like, for most teams in the A's situation, the one big question would be, how does the young core come up and prove itself, right? And that is Soderstrom, that is Butler, that is Boyle and Miller, right? But it's like, who are the fans caring about those players? Okay.
Yeah.
Typically, it would be Oakland fans investing in the next wave. But it's like, why would they care about the future? They're not going to continue rooting for this team once they bounce. And so putting your heart into every Lawrence Butler at bat doesn't feel like a good use of time. Are there baseball fans in Vegas like tuning in and like living and dying with the Mason Miller appearances? Maybe. But because of that, it is an atypical environment for the young players, at least like for like how we take them in.
Yeah. I mean, the two parts about that, one is much more funny than the others. You mentioned Vegas. Well, remember, the Vegas AAA affiliate is there. So in some way it works out well, because it's like, in theory, if you are a baseball fan in Vegas and you go to Vegas Aviators games, you've seen these players come up, and it's like, you are going to get excited about them. But then obviously if they go to Oakland, it's like, when are they going to actually be in Las Vegas? That is such a big part of this. Even if you are a fan in Las Vegas, how do you know that, Esteury Ruiz is going to be on the team by the time they get there? You don't, right? But then that's why, and this is something I talked about all of last season, that's why this is just such a sad, frustrating situation. Of course, for the fans, and that is first and foremost, but for the players, like, it's not like the players are being dealt this ridiculous card on top of the fact that they already have to play in these, substandard facilities. It's that the fans, but I think the fans get it. I think that the way that we saw, remember when they had that wild, 7-game win streak last year, like, they know even if they aren't going to get to cheer on, Zach Geloff when he becomes an all-star, it's not his fault. He's wearing their jersey that they love, and they're going to want to see him succeed. And so in that sense, I totally hear what you're saying about the investment, but I still think that because A's fans are such great baseball fans who understand the situation, it's not going to be taken out on the players. Now, obviously, attendance is attendance for a reason, but that also has nothing to do with the players. It does because they're not experienced or good enough to win a lot of baseball games, and so that also makes it harder to go. But I do still think that that's what just makes the off the field stuff impact how we view the on field. And it's just unfair. It's unfortunate. And I will say, Mark Kotsay, the manager, had some really interesting quotes recently. Again, think about how tough of a job he has for a million reasons, right? And he said that the goal that he's challenging his guys to do this year is 500. And that's, of course, sounds like a really ambitious goal, right? But like, that's a guy who totally understands where he's at, and a young group that wants to go out and say, hey, we don't suck. And that is something that this team is why they will be fun to watch, when you have enough of these young players that say, hey, screw it. Like, I'm sure everyone tells me we're supposed to be the worst team in baseball. And, statistically, that is probably going to be the case because of how inexperienced they are and because of where the pitching staff is. But I think that in that sense, I think that that's what will be maybe slightly different about this year versus last year is because you have so many younger guys that really want to prove it. And I think that is what I'm most excited about in that sense. But obviously all the off the field stuff that continues to drag on in ugly ways is the most important.
And because of that, my key player is John Fisher, the owner of the Oakland Athletics, just because I'm fascinated where they're going to play next season. There is so much to figure out about the move to Vegas, and a big chunk is where they're going to play in 25, 26, and 27 before that stadium is ready. They lose the TV rights and the TV money if they leave a certain geographical area, which will restrict where they are able and willing and want to go. So I'm really fascinated about that. But Jordan, let's talk about the guy on the field that is making you interested in this team, Joe Boyle. Why do you like this guy? You've loved this guy for a while.
Oh, yeah. I mean, since Notre Dame. I mean, this dude has had hellacious stuff, top of the line, like absurd fastball velocity and like fastball life. The slider, like when you throw this hard, obviously you're gonna dream on how good the arsenal can become. But his control was so bad, he was unusable like as a mop-up reliever in the ACC. Like it was untenable, right? And somehow his command has just gotten better at every stop. But even as recently as before he got traded last year, he was starting in the red system. It was still like the highest walk rate of any starting pitcher. But the stuff is so good. The fastball grades out on all these, Stuff Plus models in such a ridiculous way that his strikeout rates have been nuts. He's been able to kind of harness it enough to be a starter. He certainly has the build to do so. And after the Reds traded him to Oakland for Sam Maul, who I have to say was quietly amazing last year in relief for Cincinnati, he went the A's rotation and he's just throwing strikes, and he's doing it again this spring. And now with some of the injuries that they have to Luis Medina, most notably, it seems like he's going to be in the rotation to start the year. And it's just the kind of thing that, listen, do we know if he's a good pitcher yet? I don't know. But this is someone you will want to watch. And Mason Miller, his story is a lot more complicated. But in terms of stuff, he is someone that you are going to want to tune in and watch pitch. So in that sense, the A's haven't had a lot of those guys since they've been rebuilding. And that is why I'm excited for Joe Boyle.
The thing that makes me laugh about the A's is the idea of a young player on the A's feeling confident enough about their own future to buy a home in Vegas right now. I don't know if anyone will do that, but I love the idea of Zach Geloff just like having a pad.
Geloff would be the one, man. He looks like the real deal. And I was a little bit skeptical about him as an amateur and the defensive profile, but he looks great. And if he's that guy, that's a big pillar. I got a long way to go. I'll just say quickly, very fascinated how the catching situation works out, because Soderstrom was actually catching a lot down the stretch last year in September. So like Langoliers is going to have to show something. If like figuring out who your catcher of the future is important for any team, no matter how good or bad you are. And whether that's Langoliers or Soderstrom or Daniel Susac, who they just took in the first round a couple years ago, is also, I think, going to be really interesting. 57.5, Jake. It is the lowest over-under on the board. The projections have them closer to 70 wins, which again, this speaks to how many more veterans they have, how many young players are more bullish on. I think I'm taking the over, but 70 seems pretty optimistic.
I'll slam the over. I mean, they won 50 last year. Okay, so this is an 8-win improvement, which is substantial. But I'm banking on it. I think they end up close to like 62 wins. That's where I
think it's 65. I think 65 is doable for this group. So there we go. All right. Let's talk about the Angels. Let's talk about the
Angels. How'd they do last year? They went 73-89, but boy, was it an eventful 73-89. On July 31st. Okay. July 31st, they were 56-51.
Was that the game? Oh, I'm thinking like the week before then. What was the game they had that doubleheader? The Ohtani doubleheader in Detroit. That is when it was like, oh man, the Angels are going to do it. The Angels have it together. They are going to be buyers. That was like what turned them into buyers, is that stretch I remember.
Yes. So that was like a couple days before, but they're 56 and 51, and it's like they're in the mix, and they make some trades. They go get Lucas Giolito, and they, I guess,
Lopez and Grichuk, and it was, yeah.
And then it fell off a cliff. If you go on their Baseball Reference page, there was a whole lot of red as the season comes to an end. It was not particularly close. They had a crazy August schedule, and they just got whooped. Like their August run differential must have been just comically bad. Ohtani gets hurt in September, and then what happened over the winter? He left. He is not on the Angels. He still lives in Los Angeles area, except now he's on the Dodgers. They also got a new manager, Ron Washington. That's kind of fun. But besides that, they didn't do a whole lot. Now, who is on this team right now? Behind the dish, Logan O'Hoppe, catcher of the future. Believe in this guy. First base, Nolan Schanuel. Second base, Luis Rengifo. Third base, Anthony, I love baseball, Rendon. Shortstop, Zach Neto. Left field, Taylor Ward. Center field, Michael Nelson Trout. Trucking on. Right field, Mickey M. Not Mantle. Moniak. DH, not Shohei Ohtani. Brandon Drury. I have to say, decent lineup.
Sure.
Not an abomination of a major league lineup. There are a lot of things I like. However, can't say the same about the starting rotation. Reed Detmers, Griffin Canning, Patrick Sandoval, Tyler Anderson, and Chase Silseth. Silseth is the only player the Angels took in the 2021 draft, in which they took 20 pitchers. They only drafted pitchers. He's the only one who has made the big leagues so far, and I believe he was an 11th round pick. Tough look. Bullpen, Carlos Estevez, Robert Stevenson, who they signed for big money over the offseason. I believe he's already hurt. And the eternal Matt Moore, who rages against the dying of the light.
Yes.
What is this team without Shohei Ohtani, Jordan?
Well, I will say that bringing in Ron Washington is really making me way more interested about this team than I would have been had they, for some reason, kept Phil Nevin around. But now it's just back to the Mike Trout show, and a lot has changed since Mike Trout was the top billing, in Anaheim. And it starts and ends with that. I mean, he's the most important part about it, no matter what, right? I mean, if he can get back to MVP form or close to it, and the rest of the stuff can go well enough, all right, we can start now. Again, you could say, well, yeah, he was that good and they didn't win any games either. And that's true, right? That's the fact. But it's still the thing I'm most thinking about because he's one of the most important players in baseball history. So in that sense, we're kind of back on that focus. But it's also just like, how do they stay remotely relevant? I mean, you could argue they were irrelevant with Shohei. And now they are in a situation where in this division, which is not easy, they have a very, very tough hill to climb with very few reinforcements to come. And so this group with the young players, they've zoomed to the big leagues. If they're not good or they're not ready or they're not getting better, they have no hope, or at least certainly not this year. And so that's what is really daunting about this season on top of all the obvious parts about it.
The key player for me is Mike Trout, which is really like, duh. If Mike Trout is an 8-win player, which, by the way, he has not been over a full season really since 2019 because he's missed so much time. If he can be one of the best players in the world and an MVP candidate, the Angels have a shot at making a wild card. I believe that. Like, he is so transformative when he is rolling. Jordan, is Mike Trout cooked?
No.
Can he be Mike Trout again?
I would definitely bet the under on 140 games played, but I will take the easy over on a 155 OPS plus. And last year he was at 138, 137, which is a career year for 95% of players. 131 was a catastrophe for Mike Trout.
Yeah.
But I certainly can no longer bet on the durability. But I will bet that absolutely Mike Trout will be one of the best hitters in baseball again. Now, is that going to be enough? I don't. Also, like, what is he in center at this point is another thing that I always wonder about, because even when he's been hurt, he's still registering like 96 percentile sprint speed. So because the day he moves out of center is really when we start, contemplating our own mortality. And so I don't know. Of course, he'll see a lot more time at DH, I'm sure, this year, but it's more about when he's not playing center field that I'm going to really start being like, oh my gosh, that's not Mike Trout anymore.
Trout has chosen to like stick around. He has made it very clear that he is committed. Defiant. He's committed to this process, which I respectfully think is detached from reality. I appreciate the loyalty and the principle of the thing. But if he has spent this much time around this organization and believes that he legitimately has any chance to win, he is just not.
Well, but again,
no way.
Sure. No, of course. But at the same time, I will say that him talking this past winter was the most direct he'd kind of acknowledged, like, yeah, like, I understand people want me to ask for a trade. Like, he basically said that, he's like, I get it. And winning here just means more to me. And that's fine. I can't tell him he's wrong. I can tell him that it's probably not going to happen, but I can't tell him that he's wrong. I can't tell him that he doesn't want to do that. And so now we're basically left with just like a mega exaggerated Damian Lillard situation where it's like, bro, man, it's not going to happen. Like, I know how much you mean to this franchise, but sorry. And then eventually he's like, all right, let me go to the Bucks. Now, are we going to see that with Mike Trout at some point? Maybe. But it is first of all, the contract is going to be something that is going to limit his market no matter what, right? Not that there aren't going to be teams that want to trade for Mike Trout, but it's just what he wants to do. And so I'm not just going to yell at him. Again, this is different than the Chris Bryant situation, right? For a lot of reasons, where it's like he said, this is something that he believes it and he is loyal. And I mean, I respect it. Of course, I'd like to see Mike Trout in the playoffs, but I've been so used to the story that I can't say that I'm particularly surprised.
He's so comfortable with the status quo, okay? In my opinion, his life is good. He has a good life as it is.
Yeah.
And I understand why he would not want to change that or risk messing that up. But I think the idea that we're saying, oh, he's so loyal, like, that's great. But like, for what? Like,
I honestly like
for who is it? Yeah. No, I just want to say for who is it's not for, to Artie Moreno.
It's for the organization.
It's to the fans. It's for not to the organization. It should not be to the organization because the organization has not built well around him. Mike Trout does not owe the Angels crap. Okay, well, and I am
of course somewhat. That's fine. But
I'm fascinated why he believes he does. Right. And maybe it's to the fan base. If it's to the fan base.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's the organization. Sure. I mean, everything you're saying is accurate, but to me, it's much more simple. The baseball player brain, we've seen this 100 times. This is just happening.
Yeah.
They drafted me 25th. They gave me the biggest contract in baseball history. And these fans have been cheering me on since I was 18. Like, that goes a long way. Like, to me, that is a lot of things to feel an obligation to. I don't think he's running. People say, "Oh, he's." Is anyone arguing that? I mean, I agree with you. Yeah, the organization has clearly failed him, continues to fail him, will probably continue to fail him. That is sad. That is unfortunate. I am bummed that Mike Trout will not get to play in big games. And he's acknowledging and he's saying, "I know that. I hear you, and I am making the decision that this is where I want to try and win." But like Damian Lillard, that can change very soon. So this does not mean he will be on the Angels for the rest of his career. It just means that where he is at right now, he wants to keep trying. And I understand that, even if it is hard to fathom. By the way, too, unlike Chris Bryant, where the Rockies have 0% chance of winning, the Angels, even though, again, they have not proven anything and have however many seasons under 500 in a row, we can look at the roster and at least squint and say they can make a wild card. So that is something.
Here is something I don't believe. That is hot takey. But to me, the take is like, if Mike Trout really cared about winning, he would not be comfortable staying where he is. He is prioritizing a number of other things in his life over winning. Loyalty, comfort, obligation. And that's fine. I'm not faulting that. Like, winning is just another thing that goes on the scale. But my thought is, if it was number one for him, I don't think he would be an Angel anymore. Let me just bookend that. Bookend that. I don't think I believe what I just said, but I said.
Okay. Well, I'm curious because this is clearly something that we've decided we haven't talked about Mike Trout before, but it seems like we differ at least slightly about how this is. And I'm curious what people think and how people perceive Mike Trout now. So again, we'll plug baseballbarbacast@gmail.com. If you want to, in between asking us to be in our fantasy league, tell us what you think about Mike Trout. Because fan sentiment is very interesting.
I'm not trying to villainize him. Like, I think he is making a completely legitimate decision.
Yeah.
I just think if he believes that they are going to win with him there, he's out of his mind.
Well, that wouldn't be the first time a baseball player believes something that didn't make a lot of sense.
All right.
We should, again, this is a lot of Mike Trout talk. I mean, otherwise, the Angels, listen, I will say one key for them, if they are going to have any success, I mean, the young guys is very important and interesting. I mean, they spent a lot of money on the bullpen, and the biggest contract went to Robert Stevenson, who I believe has not thrown a pitch this spring training. Again, maybe that's just bad luck, but it's like, this is kind of why you don't invest in relievers anyway. It's so fragile and so like it's just this is again why it's like so difficult to buy into when so many of these moves have just gone so immediately wrong. Again, we're looking at one still in the rotation and Tyler Anderson. It's just hard to trust that they are moving in the right direction. But if the bullpen they spent money on isn't actually that good, if these young guys, that young core of Shanuel Neto and Ohapi can't actually take that next step offensively, they're going to have a tough time. On top of the fact that, as we'll continue to talk about, this is a very good division.
What makes me laugh? The showdown of the century. Ron Washington, who loves baseball more than anybody else I think I've ever met, and Anthony Rendon, who doesn't hate baseball, but doesn't like it as much as many other big leaguers. Okay, that is a truth. How will that play out? Can Ron Washington get Anthony Rendon to care and enjoy his ball? It is one of the most underrated storylines of the season, an unstoppable object against an immovable force. That's the incorrect way to say that, but just something to keep an eye on all season long. Who wins this tug of war? I have my money on a draw. Okay. I think 1 point to each side. I think a draw would be seen as a good away. It's a good result for Ron Washington.
Yeah. Like if Anthony Rendon plays 130 baseball games, like we're feeling pretty good. 72.5 is the over under. Man, I still kind of it's like I still kind of want to go slightly over, but I think I have to go under here.
So it's a great line because they won 73 last year. So what it's asking you is, are they going to be better without Shohei?
And it's certainly hard to say that. And that's why I think I'm going to go under. Just with so little depth, they are just like a couple injuries from a very dire depth chart. Yeah. Depth chart is not what they have. They have a chart and they hope that nothing happens to it.
More like a death chart. All right, let's take a quick break here. And when we come back, we will do the Mariners, the Rangers, and the Astros. And welcome back to Baseball Barbacast. Jake Mintz, Jordan Shusterman, the American League West preview rolls on. Let's hop on a boat and talk about Jordan's favorite baseball team, the Seattle Mariners. How did they do in 2023? They won 88 games in the wrong order. Jordan, explain me.
It was a rough first few months, and then they got unbelievably hot in August, 21-6, thanks to God-level Julio Rodriguez, who at one point had the most hits in a 4-game span that any player ever has in baseball history. And then it all went wrong in September, and they got eliminated on the final weekend of the season for what feels like the 5 millionth time in the last decade. 88 wins is a lot. This team was good, but not good in the right order, as you said. And so they went into the offseason with some unfortunate financial constraints relating to their strange Root TV deal. And instead of some teams who complained about their TV deal and decided to do absolutely nothing, like the Rangers in some respect that we'll talk about, the Mariners were like, all right, well, we're the Mariners front office. That's Jerry Dipoto. We're not going to do nothing. That's not what we do. We gotta do something. And boy, did they do something. They were quite active. They made, I think, 8 or 9 trades. Of course they did. They signed a free agent to a multi-year deal in Mitch Garver. That is not something they have done in recent years. They made some trades for some pitchers, Gregory Santos, who from the White Sox, who's now injured. They traded away Robbie Ray to bring back Mitch Haniger. They trade for Jorge Polanco, finally getting a stable second baseman. They trade for Luke Raley. They trade for Luis Urias. So many trades. This offense looks dramatically different. And now they enter this season trying to get back to the postseason. And the key thing, really, from their offseason is who they didn't trade, because the assumption was if they were going to upgrade their offense, they were going to have to trade from their wealth of young starting pitching, and they managed to not do that at all. And so they come into the year with an ultra-hyped, ultra-talented pitching staff of Luis Castillo, Logan Gilbert, George Kirby, Bryce Miller, and Brian Wu. Who else is on the team, Jake? Let's go around the diamond.
Behind the dish is Cal Raleigh. At first base, Ty France, the Ty de France. Second base, Jorge Polanco. Third base, maybe you, the listener. Yeah. The Mariners, Jerry cannot build a complete roster. Always got to have one position that is a shrug emoji. And this year, that shrug emoji is a 3-headed monster of Josh Rojas, Luis Urias, Dylan Moore. Is he going to see some time at third?
Probably at some point. Yeah,
probably. You might too. Shortstop is JP Crawford, who is just an awesome baseball player. I'm so happy about what he's become. Left field, Luke Raley, Julio Rodriguez in center, Mitch Haniger in right, with some Dominic Canzone thrown in there for good measure. And then Mitch Garver, DH. 2 new Mitches, 1 Mitch coming back, 1 Mitch brand new. You mentioned the rotation already, and then the relievers are Andres Munoz, Matt Brash, if he's healthy, and Ryan Stanek, friend of the show, joining the squad.
Yes, so they just signed Ryan Stanek very recently, and Brash having some elbow trouble. His not quite as dire as Gerrit Cole, but I can't say I'm shocked that the guy who has the most vicious slider in baseball, who led the league in appearances last year, is maybe having some elbow trouble. That's not the most shocking development. And Gregory Santos, who was an outstanding reliever for the White Sox last year, coming over from the trade, he also is going to be injured to start the season, unfortunately.
So my big question here, they did a lot in the lineup. Is it better, or is it shuffling deck chairs on a Titanic?
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, the deck chairs analogy, although of course it's nice to stay nautical with the Mariners, I don't think the ship is sinking, but
I know, yeah.
If the concern is, did they actually change anything enough? Again, let's compare, right? What actually changed? So we mentioned who went in. In the infield, they basically swapped the platoon from second base to third base, and they brought in Jorge Polanco for Eugenio Suarez. Is Polanco a better player than Eugenio Suarez? I think yes, but it's you could debate it, right? I mean, his offense has been more consistent. Suarez, of course, has now become a very good defensive third baseman, but the bat has been trending in the wrong direction, whereas Polanco is a switch hitter who's been much more reliable offensively.
He's certainly a less infuriating watch.
Yes. When Gino is bad, it is bad. But when Gino is good, it is a delight. In the outfield, we have Mitch Haniger coming back in place of Teoscar Hernandez. Now, the offensive ceiling for those players is not too dissimilar, but Mitch Haniger has not played a lot of baseball consistently, whereas Teoscar Hernandez posts, right? And so that's a different there. And again, you're presumably getting fewer strikeouts with Teoscar. And then in the outfield, of course, the real big one that started off this offseason, and we have some minor news related to this too, is they traded away Jarred Kelenic as part of their massive salary dump to have some more flexibility to make some of these moves. And they bring in Luke Raley. Jarred Kelenic has been terrible this spring training. Luke Raley has also been terrible this spring training. However, the kinds of players that they are is probably not that different, right? However, Luke Raley comes with zero of the context that makes the Jarred Kelenic situation that much more complicated, and is just kind of a dude from Ohio who's happy to be in the big leagues. That's not really Gerrit Cole's vibe. And so I think they brought in Luke Raley to think, they're like, listen, Luke Raley could probably give us a lot of similar things. We got some power speed upside. He can play some center, play some first, and he'll probably be a similar kind of production. And Kelenic, it just was not happening, right? Whatever happens with him in Atlanta, that's for the NLA's preview on Monday. But Raley is that. So that is what is different.
And Mitch Garver, who's coming to be the designated
Mitch Garver,
hitter.
That's the biggest one. Thank you. Because the DH has been branded, right? They've been rotating guys through. Mike Ford has a hot stretch here and there. Mitch Garver is a real DH. He was the DH for the World Series champions.
He had fourth. He had fourth for the team that won the World Series.
And by the way, of course, he was a catcher coming up. When he moved to DH full time, really in the second half, that's really when he took off, right? So he is not expected to catch very much for this team. Sebi Zavala is there as the backup, and Cal Raleigh is going to catch like 130 games. So I think it is a better lineup. Is it like suddenly definitively like one of the best lineups in baseball? No. And with the injury concerns, there are concerns. And you could see how, because this is also a team that doesn't have a ton of depth at the upper levels right now. Some more so now with guys like Ryan Bliss, Samad Taylor, an interesting ad. But that's the concern here, is in terms of real power production, they need those guys to be healthy. And it's not hard to imagine that not being the case.
So the lineup doesn't need to be a juggernaut because the rotation is so good.
Yeah.
But my key player is Julio Rodriguez, because on July 24th last season, Julio had a 709 OPS.
Oh, he sure did.
That is a mark that is lower. That was lower at the time than Adam Frazier, and Trent Grisham, and Michael Conforto, and Carlos Santana. It was actively bad. Like he was not active. Sorry. He was a mid hitter for 4 months.
Yeah.
Okay. Now over the last 2 months, he was so freaking good that he finished with an 818 OPS, who's like, which is very good in that ballpark. Like you said, he was unbelievable in August. Unbelievable in August. Just incredible.
Again, it was like one of the greatest months we've seen in like the last 10 years. He hit 429, 474, 724 in August. Now, again, even when he was struggling offensively, he was stealing bases, he was hitting home runs, he was playing exquisite defense in the center, which basically ensured that he was still going to be a plus player and an MVP candidate. But he salvaged his season offensively with that incredible last few months. And you're saying that, he is still the guy that drives the bus here.
Yeah, I mean, he was on a 40-40 pace in August, right? And like, if the Mariners lineup...
almost 50-50.
Almost 50-50. If the Mariners lineup is going to be good enough, not great, but good enough, they need the guy who the whole project is built around to play like an MVP candidate for the entire season.
Yeah.
Now, he doesn't need to be a 11-win player. There just needs to be an increase in consistency. Yeah. His floor is so high. Like last year was about as bad as it could have gone for 4 months, barring like major injury.
Right.
And he was still providing a ton of value. So like, he's obviously, I'm not like worried or anything, but if the Mariners want to win 92 games, 93 games, Julio Rodriguez needs to kick people's ass every day.
Sure.
Who's your key player, Jordan?
I'm going to stick in the lineup with Ty France, because that's a spot that at the beginning of the offseason, and we wondered how they were going to change their lineup. That was a spot where it was like, is Ty France going in the wrong direction? Are they going to kind of turn the page here? And instead, they said, all right, Ty France, go to Driveline, see if you can change something, and we're going to keep you as our first baseman. And if he can get back to, because he was a top 10 first baseman production-wise in 2021, 2022. He was not that last year. He was bottom 10, bottom 6 or 7 in terms of power production. And that's what is the key for him, is kind of finding that power stroke again. The underlying data said that he actually wasn't that different last year and maybe got a little bit unlucky, but it didn't look good for a good chunk of last year. And if he can get back to that, now when you bring in these other parts, now it's looking like a very, very good lineup. But if not, now it's like he's heading towards non-tender territory if he's repeating that same season. So he is going to be very, very, very important for them. But the pitching, I mean, we're not even touching on it. If it's healthy, it's going to be one of the best rotations in baseball. I feel very strongly about that. I'm writing about them for Yahoo, so we'll have that piece coming soon. But it's just a very special group, and keeping those young guys in there just sustains a level of upside that would have been a little bit more dicey had they decided to deal one of them away. What is funny, they have 2 Mitches now.
Yeah.
And because the Mariners' social accounts have been so used to tweeting about Mitch Haniger, they're still just referring to him as Mitch, first name only. So it's, Mr. Garver has a lot of work to do to kind of work his way in there, because for now he's just Mr. Garver, Garv sauce.
Shouts out to my father-in-law, Mitch, who is worse at baseball than both those guys. Over under 86.5.
I'm sticking over here. I'm
over,
obviously biased, but I also feel pretty good about this team now. I'm again, and for where we were feeling at the start of this offseason, it is a pretty remarkable achievement for this front office. So I'm feeling pretty good. I'm feeling over here.
Next up, the Texas Rangers. How'd they do last year? They won their final game, and it wasn't on October 1st. It was like in November.
They didn't. So they lost their final game in the regular season.
Yeah.
Because George Kirby was throwing knuckleballs.
Heck yeah. The Rangers finished 90-72. They got into the playoffs by 2 games and blew the division on the final day. And it was like, wow, they're going to just get dog walked in October. Mm-hmm. Nope. They won. They won it all.
They kept winning.
They kept winning.
Undefeated
they swept
on the
Rays. Undefeated on the road. Swept the Rays, swept the Orioles, went the distance with the Astros, won 6-7 in Houston, and then took care of business against the Diamondbacks in the World Series. But the job's not finished. There is another season to dominate and win, and the Rangers are back. They spent the winter on vacation, doing basically nothing. They win the award for the 2023-2024 offseason. TV deal is restricting us from spending money championship, because usually when a team wins a title in any sport, they anticipate an increase in revenue the following year. It works on a tape delay, right? Because fans are excited and they're buying more tickets and they buy more gear and more people watch the year after a team wins. So usually teams will spend some money after they win. The Diamondbacks did this, right? They're probably anticipating more money coming in. Rangers, no. They signed David Robertson.
Mm-hmm. And Kirby
and
Yates.
I guess
and Tyler
Kirby
Mahle,
Yates,
who is
and Tyler
injured.
Mahle.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's hard to criticize this team for not spending money because they spent a lot of money in free agency and then won a World Series because of it. And so if we're like ranking the teams 1 to 30 on who we want to throw tomatoes at for being cheap, the Rangers are like in the bottom 10. Yep. However, in this particular context, that's important. Starting lineup. Behind the dish, Jonah Heim. First base, Nate Lowe. I think he's hurt right now.
Yeah, we got a bunch of injuries right now. Bunch of injuries right now for Texas.
So it looks like Justin Foscue is going to maybe get some of that time at first base.
Yeah.
He's going to be the first baseman. Marcus Semien, who
he'll be there.
He'll be there. Iron Man, baby.
He's not worried about him.
He puts, ready? This is a banger. I just want you to be ready for it. He puts the Cal in Cal Ripken. Because he went to Berkeley.
Oh,
that's good.
Nice. Very good.
That's a good joke.
Nice
Thank
work.
you so much.
He's only got like 2,000 games to go.
I'm here all the time, guys. Josh Young at third base.
Also injured.
Corey Seager, also injured.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Or was injured. Yeah.
Was injured. Corey Seager at shortstop. I think, is he hurt?
Also injured. But
injured. We'll see. But don't worry about it. They won last year. Evan Carter in left field, not injured. Because he's got a job to do. He's got unfinished business. Leody Taveras in center field, Adolis Garcia in right field. The designated hitter was Mitch Haniger, and now it going to be
Garver.
some.
Definitely wasn't Mitch Haniger.
Wasn't Mitch Haniger. Mitch Garver. Now it'll probably be Wyatt Langford for a good chunk of the season whenever he gets called up.
Langford. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other important character is Ezekiel Duran, because the injuries to Seager and Josh Young and Nate Lowe mean that there's probably going to be some playing time to be had on the infield, and Duran is the guy who's going to kind of pick up those pieces. Speaking of injuries, let's talk about the Rangers starting rotation. Nate Eovaldi, John Gray, Andrew Heaney, Dane Dunn, and Cody Bradford. Solid. That sounds for now, because lurking in the wings, okay, working their way back to health. This is like Batman in that big pit in that movie. Jacob deGrom, Max Scherzer, and Tyler Mahle. Whoa, the big three. In the bullpen, Jose Leclerc, David Robertson, Kirby Yates, and Josh Sborz, who was Mariano Rivera for like 2 weeks last year in October. I just love that deGrom and Scherzer are just waiting. They're just waiting. I want to be very clear about something. I don't want to come across as dismissive to this team because they did win. They won. They won it with these players mostly because they didn't do anything in October. These guys won the big one, the whole kit and caboodle. However, I'll skip ahead. I'm smashing the under on 89.5. Okay. And that is because I say this all the time. If you build the ship out of old wood, you can't be surprised when the boat sinks. And I am so worried, not just about deGrom and Scherzer coming back and being effective whenever they're healthy, because remember, they're old and like older bodies take longer to heal and don't heal as well when they are healed. But Eovaldi, Gray, Heaney, Dunning is durable. Eovaldi
and Gray. Gray's been healthy. Yeah.
But there is volatility in that group in a way that like does not give me confidence. And the injuries that are already piling up in the lineup have me very uneasy. So I guess the big question for this club, I'll let you talk now, Jordan. Can they stay afloat until sorry, this is insulting, the real pitchers get back?
I mean, it's like $80 million on this pitcher IL, right? Yeah. And again, I think it's important to reflect on last season where their offense was so good for the first few months that we didn't even really care who was pitching. Like it just, and they had deGrom whatever for 6 starts, and then Scherzer, like they had all those a bunch of injuries last year, but because the lineup was so good. And by the way, if they can, clean up some of these injuries in the spring, the lineup could be that good again. And it might be the same thing where they're scoring 8 runs a game and Wyatt Langford's going to hit 40 home runs, and you're getting a full year of Josh Young and full year of Evan Carter and all these things, right? So they could repeat that. But with the injuries to the lineup, like they can't really afford a slow start here because they just don't have the pitchers to cover it up. And I still, not to mention the bullpen. I mean, okay, that's great. David Robertson and Kirby Yates have been pretty good recently. They're also in their late 30s. And so they're just riding with these vets, which, can work. And it obviously worked to some degree last year. But they to your point, I mean, what situation are they in if and when we get deGrom and Scherzer back, which, by the way, is not at all a certain thing, especially for deGrom, who got surgery in June. Also,
if there's one thing about Jacob deGrom, it's that his timetable to return to play is not always the most reliable.
And if there's one thing about Scherzer, it's that even if he comes back, he might be heading right back to the IL. I respect the hell out of Max because he's one of the most incredible pitchers, competitors, human beings we've ever seen in this sport. But yeah. I'm sorry, we watched him do that like 4 different times last season. So that's kind of where I'm at with him too.
He might just throw a pitch and like his back will become like detached from his lower half on the mound.
And Eovaldi, while his postseason resume is indisputable, like his regular season track record from both a health and performance standard has not been amazing over the last 2 seasons. So that's why we're taking the under. However, let's stay positive here for a second, and key players like there's so many hitters to choose from, and I think let's many. Again, Evan Carter is fascinating to me. Can he hit lefties? Is he going to play center at all? Is he what's the power at? But Wyatt Langford is the difference maker here, right? I think he's going to be their DH on opening day. And if we're just, if we have a dual, rookie of the year race between him and Evan Carter, that's a pretty good place to be. And the power production for him, especially if we're having some injuries at the beginning, Wyatt Langford sure looks healthy. I mean, he had another grand slam last night. He is just an offensive freak. He is so gigantic, so strong, so just that the slug is going to translate immediately. I'm sure there's going to be some adjustment period. There's no way he's going to be hitting 350 as he did every minor league level, but the power is going to be there immediately, I think, and that is a new element to this lineup. So I think that there's still a lot to be very excited about for this Rangers team. But hey, they kind of blew it last year and they snuck in and then they got hot again. So there are enough questions for what we saw over 162 last year that I have in this year as well.
So my key player is going to be Jonah Heim, who was very, very good as an offensive catcher last year and very impressive. His framing numbers are
I mean,
sublime.
he won the Gold Glove too. I mean, this is
won the
an
Gold
all-around
Glove.
catcher.
But the thing I'm really curious about him is, so he was like pretty bad at throwing runners out in 21 and 22, and then took like a huge step forward last year. Yeah. I'm curious how sustainable that is. I think that he's just such a fascinating part of this team because he's the type of like waiver wire trade throw-in finds that you need to have if you're going to compete. Like you can't buy the whole roster.
Yeah, you got to nail some things like that. That's a great
it's hard to draft the whole roster. And so like the one I always think about in this context, and this is very different, is Jake Arrieta on the Cubs, right? Like unearthing a player like that and turning them into something better at the big league level. Jonah Heim was a huge part of that. I'm really interested to see what kind of player he is this year. Something that makes us laugh. Evan Carter, job not finished. I mean, what is the unfinished bit? I guess it is not unfinished business, even though he said job's not finished.
But here's what's amazing, right? He set it up so perfectly, right? Because he's going into this year like we're doing it again, and we're going to win the World Series again. And then if and when they fall short, now we are bad. Now it's more traditional unfinished business. Now it's really the job's not finished. So that mindset, if he can maintain it through a World Series at age 21, I mean, he's golden for the rest of his career.
I actually think the opposite is even funnier, where if they win the World Series again and they become the first team to win back-to-back since the Yankees in the 90s, does he say unfinished business again?
Yeah, job's still not
in
finished.
The parade. Job's still not finished.
That's the thing. I guess not that I want the Rangers to win the next 5 World Series, but just to see how Evan Carter continues his kind of view on his competitive fire, I think that is definitely interesting.
I'm currently listening to a podcast about the Russian Revolution.
Okay, yeah.
And I just learned about this theory from Trotsky, from Leon Trotsky, about permanent revolution. Okay. That revolution is always happening. It's not like,
there was a revolution during these years. It's like, no, it's always it's a constant. And that's Evan Carter. Permanent unsatisfaction, I guess. We already said it. 89.5. I mean, Pacoda has the Rangers at 86. Fangraphs has them at 82. So yeah, but it's just like with this many injury question marks, which by the way extends to these ones in spring training, I have no idea how to project any of this. It's just like the range of games played and who's going to be playing. This isn't even just like hypothetical, like with the Mariners where it's like, oh, like if they get hurt, like at least they're all healthy to start the year, at least the hitters. I mean, with the Rangers, I don't know when DeGrom might throw 0 pitches this year, right? Scherzer might throw 100 innings. I have no clue. So projecting this team is borderline impossible. But we're still taking the under on 89.5.
Over under 20 combined starts DeGrom and Scherzer.
20.5 combined starts for DeGrom and Scherzer. I'm going to take the under. I'm taking the under. I have a hard time believing DeGrom's going to be back before late August, September. I'm not sure what the updates are on his timeline, but I mean, he got surgery in June. That's just not middle of June. Like and I don't know if people are talking, maybe we're totally off base and no one is expecting DeGrom to come back this year. So I apologize, but it feels like the way people are talking about him, and Scherzer at least says like, yeah, I'll be back in the first couple months.
All right, let's talk about the Houston Astros, our last team. Last in the preview, first in the division, last in the hearts of Americans. How did things go for them in 2024?
They made it to the ALCS again, but it was a very rocky road to get there. They have been so comfortable atop this division for so many years now. And they were in second place for most of last season until when it mattered, winning the division on the final day, but ultimately falling to the rival Rangers at home. What a weird ALCS that was. And now they go into the offseason and you say, yikes, Astros. That was kind of embarrassing. I know you made it to the LCS again, but you lost to the Rangers? Really? You couldn't win a home game? Really? What's going on? And what did they decide to do? They signed Josh Hader. This was probably one of the more interesting moves we had all offseason was the Astros signing Josh Hader, added to a bullpen that was already one of the best in baseball. Ryan Presley, one of the most established closers in baseball. But Josh Hader is going to be the closer. And they bring him in and do basically nothing else. I guess they signed Victor Caratini to be the backup because now Yainer Diaz is going to be the catcher. And that's a good place to start as you take us around the diamond, because Martin Maldonado is no longer, and related to that is that Dusty Baker is no longer the manager.
That did happen over the offseason. New skipper for them is going to be Joe Espada, who has been in that dugout for quite a long time. Behind the dish, like you said, Yainer Diaz, first base, Jose Abreu, in year 2 of his deal with the Astros. The beginning of last year was a catastrophe wrapped in a horror show, bundled up inside of just bad hitting. He turned things around a little bit towards the end, but not enough to salvage his final line. Jose Altuve, who signed an extension over the winter, that feels relevant. He's at second base. Alex Bregman, third base. He is a free agent at the end of this year. Could this be his last season in Houston? Jeremy Pena at shortstop. We thought he was underrated. Then we thought he was overrated. And I think we think he's underrated again. Truly a fascinating player. Chas McCormick in left field. Love this guy. Super fun to watch. Jake Myers, Team Jake in center. Kyle Tucker in right. Yordan Alvarez, the top 5 hitter in the world, is going to be the designated hitter. See some time in the outfield as well. And the starting rotation to start the season is going to be Framber Valdez, Christian Javier, Jose Urquidy, Hunter Brown, and JP France. Justin Verlander will return at some point in the bullpen. Josh Hader, Ryan Presley, and Brian Abreu.
Oh my God. I mean, this could be a special unit. Now, Jake, why don't you read me your one big question here for the Houston Astros, and then I have some thoughts.
How does the starting pitching shake out?
Oh, well, I'm glad you wrote that when we did this a few days ago, because we have some news this morning. But reporting from Chandler Rome.
He does that. He'll do that.
Covers the Astros for The Athletic. And he has tweeted that the Astros remain engaged in the free agent starting pitching market. Owner Jim Crane coveted Blake Snell at last August's trade deadline. Now,
I remain engaged as well.
You have been engaged. That's true. Are you engaged in the
I
starting
remain
pitching
engaged.
Market?
No. But I remain engaged.
Okay,
just like the Astros.
True. The Astros, just like the Astros. Got it. Okay, I understand. So Justin Verlander is hurt to start the season. This rotation now has way more question marks than it has in the years past. And if the Astros end up signing Blake Snell or Jordan Montgomery, I would not be surprised whatsoever. Because what we know about Houston is that now that they have finally taken the leap over that luxury tax line with Hader, which they have, I think, only done once under Jim Crane. I mean, now it's only a matter of Jim Crane changing his mind and saying, why is that guy still a free agent? I want him on my team. I'm not worried about the financials anymore. Whereas all these other teams are worried about the TV and worried sorry, we're dealing with this hard cap. We can't do this. We can't go above this. This is our... Jim Crane kind of just decides when he wants to spend money. And for him to give Josh Hader $90 million and for this to be a situation where maybe he could get some sort of discount on Blake Snell or Jordan Montgomery, or at least a deal that is more reasonable, this would not surprise me whatsoever. And maybe it doesn't happen, but it does make sense and does speak to a situation where we are kind of wondering about this Astros rotation, which is not really a position we've been in the past.
This is an expensive team.
Yeah, it should be. If any team should be spending whatever they can to remain at the top, it should absolutely be them.
But I just think that's relevant because the Astros run, in my mind at least, has been like, wow, what a bunch of homegrown players, which is true because Altuve, Bregman, Alvarez, McCullers, Tucker, Valdez are all homegrown and are all making over
Diaz, Pena, McCormick, all these guys. Sorry, Diaz.
Yeah, it's a lot of homegrown players.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, in terms of guys making a lot of money, they're paying a lot to retain the players that they develop. We've reached that stage in their contention cycle. So yeah, I would imagine every year that passes as an owner gets closer to the end of their life, I imagine that they are more likely to spend money, right? Not to say that, the end is the Grim Reaper is not on Jim Crane's doorstep. That's not what I'm saying. But as this goes on and you start to see the end of the contention window, I would imagine he is more willing to spend money to keep that thing propped open.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I don't see the end of the contention window. Sure, maybe Alex Bregman leaves in free agency. And if Alex Bregman is gone, like, I'm skeptical they're going to get an extension with him. Maybe he does want to stay there. Like, we are now moving. Like, it is starting to look like a different team than it was at the very beginning of this run. But we know, I'm not surprised Altuve decided to, stay there forever. And that's great. That's how it should be. But this is how you should absolutely act if you are still at the top of the league. And if, by the way, you're coming off a bitter defeat and you feel like you need to reestablish your dominance, atop this division, would Blake Snell not do that? I mean, come on. Because again, it's not a situation where they don't have any other good pitchers. But Blake Snell and Framber Valdez, I mean, if you're a team with left-handed hitters and you have to face that in a postseason series, I don't particularly envy you. Like, that's a situation where when you're adding to a team that is already so loaded, it looks that much better, as opposed to if he signs with the Angels, it's like, oh, cool, all right, have fun with that. Now you'll win 78 games instead of 72. I mean, this would be, again, this reporting suggests Snell specifically. I mean, Montgomery would make some sense too in terms of the durability, but we're not really lining them up quite as easily. So I don't know. Again, maybe we're jumping ahead of ourselves here, but this does feel a lot like the reporting we got right before they signed Hader. So,
and the Astros have around 83 million coming off the books this winter, I believe, because remember, Justin Verlander has a vesting option.
This is a
big deal. Storyline to watch. He has a $35 million player option that he can only exercise if he reaches 140 innings pitched this year. Now, him being hurt to start the season is going to put that in jeopardy. And we could get to some fascinating territory where he really wants to, the Astros are taking him out of games that he still thinks he should be in to save the money, because he's not getting $35 million a year on the open market if he hits free agency like he did a couple years ago. So, or I guess last year. Just super interesting. Keep an eye on this storyline to watch.
Yeah. Because if he comes back in late April, 140 should still be extremely possible, But
if he goes on the IL again,
now because again, even last year with some of the issues, he still threw 162. I mean, when he's been held, he has essentially hasn't thrown less than 140 when he's only done it once when he was injured in 2015, right? When he's been fully healthy, or at least close to it, he's going to get to that number, and that's probably why that's in the contract. But man, I don't know, man. So again, we'll see. Maybe I'm just glad we're talking about this. I'm glad we got this reporting right here before, because obviously we probably wouldn't have brought this Blake Snell up otherwise.
Yainer Diaz is my key player. The Astros had Martin Maldonado as their everyday catcher since 2018. I mean, he had caught so many innings, so many different pitchers, and kept that staff moving forward and succeeding. And to have a different personality behind the dish is a big change. And I'm fascinated to see how Diaz adjusts to being the guy. I mean, he is how old is Yainer? Yainer is 25 years old. So he's not like a baby, right? But those are big shoes to fill. Mm-hmm. And so many of those pitchers just loved throwing to Maldonado. And it was good that he kind of had a year to learn under Martin. But how he adjusts is going to be a big deal this season for the Astros.
My key player, what I wrote for the preview was Christian Javier, and I do think that he's one just so fascinating, kind of the ups and downs of his last couple seasons. But I'm going to go with Hunter Brown, because he's someone that I was extremely high on going into last year. He made 29 starts and struck out a ton of guys, but the ERA was over 5, and they're sticking with him, it seems like, in the rotation. And I think some of the injuries have contributed to that. But because again, this is another thing we talked about it with the Rangers. I mean, McCullers and Luis Garcia are also maybe coming back at some point this season. So that's another thing, let alone Verlander. So that's another thing to kind of watch with them. But can Hunter Brown hang on to a rotation spot? Because I still believe in the talent here. I still watch this guy and I'm like, this dude can be really good. And the upside with him, Javier's going to find a way to be a serviceable rotation starter. It's going to be weird. It's going to, rely on some home run luck. Hunter Brown is either going to figure it out or he's going to be in the bullpen. And the idea that bullpen could have Hunter Brown in that version is also wild, because it's already such a good bullpen. But I'm really curious to see if he can figure it out, because I think that would really change the complexion of this team too. I'm glad they kind of let him go through a full season of struggles and didn't pull the plug last year, because I want to see him try again.
What makes me laugh? The Astros is the underdog. If they had won Game 7 against the Rangers, they would not have the underdog narrative about them this year.
Even if they lost to the D-backs or whatever. Honestly.
Yeah.
Right. But having lost to the Rangers at home, now they're like...
It's like no one believes in us.
Right.
Actually, I do.
I was going to say, unless you listen to this podcast and we believe in the Astros, I'm going to believe in the Astros until they are long gone.
Yeah. I'll take the heavy over on 92.5. Feel good about that.
I don't know if I'm going to go heavy over, but I am going to go over. Let's see. Maybe on Monday we got some funky Blake Snell to Houston news. It really would not. It would. I guess I should say it would shock me because I wouldn't have mentioned it before we got this reporting. But it sure makes a lot of sense. All right. Well, we previewed the American League West. I still am going to pick the Astros until they lose, but I feel a little bit better about the Mariners and the Rangers, and I think the Angels are going to be a bad baseball team again. Ace, we're rooting for you. This is it. This has been the AL West. We will be doing the NL East on Monday. Again, if you haven't checked out our bonus podcast with our Dylan Cease reaction, Mike Zunino, who is good, he joined us and was a very good podcast guest. Really enjoyed that conversation with Mike Z. Hopefully everyone enjoyed that as well. All kinds of stuff going on. Fantasy baseball. Now, we have mentioned this a few times.
Incredible emails.
This has been so much fun. On Monday, we will announce when the draft will be. You can email us at baseballbarbacast@gmail.com why you want to be in our Yahoo Fantasy League. You can sign up for Fantasy Baseball right now, yahoo.com/fantasybaseball, or on the Yahoo Fantasy app. Of course, the league will be on there. It will probably be 12 teams at least. We're going to have to come up with at least one wrinkle, whether it's 2 catchers, 3 catchers, 6 relievers.
Maybe we go AJ. How about like AJ Preller, 6 shortstops?
6 shortstops. We'll come up with something weird. But keep sending those emails why you want to be in the league, because while we have
why you should be in the league, while we have way more than 12 amazing submissions, we are going to do our best to pick our favorites, and maybe we'll read some of them at some point. If you and a friend want to run a team together, that's also fine.
Yeah, co-manage, that's fine. But obviously, it will only be one roster. So details coming soon about that. Thank you all for the support there, and we're looking forward to making that happen. And I'll be IRL. I'll be visiting New York next week, so we're going to be recording some podcasts in person. That'll be the NL East preview on Monday and the NL Central preview on Wednesday, as well as the first baseball game of the season, which is next week, by the way. That's it. We're done. Thank you all for listening. Thank you to Andrew Hartz for producing. Thank you to Brett Rader for producing, supervising everything. And everyone have a good weekend. We will talk to you all.